Hello, everybody, and welcome to Impactful Conversations. Really looking forward to this particular episode because Nejmi and I are lucky enough to be joined by Keith Antoine. Keith and I go back, I think it was about 2007 and 8, Keith, I think, when we first met, and we've done some work, not a lot, but some work over the intervening periods. And Keith is primarily a high performance coach. And very often, businesses bring people like Keith in who have a great athletics and sporting kind of background, but they've not translated that into the business sense. But Keith's been doing work with teams and leaders, for 20 years plus, and he's awesome at it, not just as a keynote speaker, but practically getting down into the weeds with the kind of technical elements and helping people have high performance conversations and driving high performance culture. So we're absolutely delighted, Keith, that you've made the time in what I know is a very busy schedule to come and join us on Impactful Conversations. Thank you very much.
Pleasure.
Great to have you.
Welcome, Keith. Maybe it would be good to kick us off with a little bit of a description around what performance means to you in the organizational context.
Yeah. Let me start by saying that I like simple, I think that you keep things simple, it just makes everything roll along nicely. So, in a really simple sense, it's that ability to get things done, to get what needs to be done in the way it needs to be done, by when it needs to be done. And if that's happening, you will perform in some way. Simple as that. But the thing is, those are the bits that are easier to pick up. People can look at the what, tend not to look so much at the how, but the what, the how, and the when, relatively straightforward. And what that will often give you is a temporary bit of performance. But all organizations want the performance to sustain. And actually, the only way to do that is to make sure that the development aspect matches the performance. You cannot have a sustained performance culture without a development culture. But like most of these things, everyone will say, yes, we take development really seriously. In which case, when I hear that, I kind of have a little check that I ask people to do. And it's simply this. I ask them in their own head, they don't need to tell me, and anyone watching this can do the same. But, give yourself a mark out of 10 for how consistently and consciously you're working to make sure that on the day when you step away, because that day will happen, that the next person that takes over is capable of doing a significantly better job than the one you're doing today.
Okay.
Because when that becomes part of what you're attempting to do, then development has to be on the agenda. It impacts every conversation you have because you are preparing the next incumbent in the chair to be better than you are.
Yeah.
Not many people will give themselves a high mark out of 10 on that question, but yet they still want to tell me, yeah, we take development seriously. I go, well, there's development and there's development. For me, it's about making sure that the next level is better. And in doing so, what that also runs into is this thing of getting beyond just getting the job done. In today's world, just getting the job done is not enough. Everybody involved has to be looking for the next step up. What is the next level? And the trouble is that tends to be in the domain of the people running things. And they're one step removed from the coalface. Whereas actually, if you can't have the conversations that encourage and challenge the people at the coalface to find the next step up, I'm sorry, that's just not going to work. So you got the what, the how, and the when. But development has to be in there as well. And actually, everyone's got to be looking for how do we take this to the next level. Whether that's a big step up, tiny step up, doesn't matter. But just getting the job done is not enough if we're serious about sustaining high performance.
Okay, so it's not just in getting the job done, it's how you do it and how you develop those around you to be able to do it when you're not there. So sustaining performance in the longer run. Okay, I really like that. I really like that view. And so what do you feel is challenging for organizations that are scoring themselves, on a scale of 1 to 10, that maybe not quite, if they're honest, they're not quite, at the 8s, 9s and 10s as they'd like to be. What do you think is challenging that prevents, organizations, teams, leaders from really stretching into that 10 out of 10 space?
It's there can be a range of things, Nejmi, that will cause that. From my experience, I've seen everything from ego. People in the big chairs like to be the people in the big chairs, like to be the best, seen to be the best, and that's okay. You'll get a measure of success from that, but it won't be sustainable because, well, let me ask you, how many times have you seen that? People who are touted as absolutely brilliant leaders because they're producing great results. And then when they step away, it's a bit of a crash and burn, which, I'm sorry, one of the fundamental things is when I go, this should continue and actually get better. So
Yeah.
if it all relies on that individual, so sometimes it's ego, and sometimes it just means, I guess in a way, that's why I like that thinking of it's about making sure the next level is better, because then you don't have to think of some complicated, overly onerous way of doing it. It's everything. Every conversation you have, every meeting, every interaction, if what's partly on your mind is it's about making sure the next generation is better, then it just happens automatically. It will take place if that's what you're trying to do. But if all we're trying to do is achieve today's results, yeah, you might. Got a feeling tomorrow's results are going to be a bit testy.
And clearly you come from a sporting background. You've got elite athletes that you've worked with, Olympic, Paralympic gold medalists, etc., etc. So this would resonate, I'm sure, with you. But if you take two conflicting or comparative examples to build on your point, Keith, which is when Sir Alex Ferguson left Manchester United hardly won a game for the next. Well, in fact, I don't think they've won a game since, almost. The same was true for England rugby, right? Clive Woodward left, and having won the World Cup, and England struggled a lot, and one might argue they've never quite reached the same heights again. So they were touted as amazing leaders at the time, but your test is, well, when you step away, is the organisation better, and does it continue to get better in your absence? I always felt, well, if you step away and it crumbles, then you haven't put all of those kind of structures in place. It's too early to say whether Jurgen Klopp has done a better job with that at Liverpool, for example. They've had an amazing year in one particular sense. And so, let's see. The jury's out still. But I really am, I think I couldn't agree with you more on, it's about not just today's short-term results, although I absolutely accept and recognise that organisations are under a lot of short-term pressure, shareholders, etc., etc. But it's actually that longer-term build with that. If you've got the high-performing culture, it should self-fulfill itself and self-sustain itself, right?
If it all hangs on one individual,
yeah,
if it all hangs on the leader to make it happen, then for me, that's just not sustainable, because that person will not, but just by nature of things, that person will not be there forever. So yeah, it's a choice. We can hang it on one person, which means when that person goes, expect a bit of a drop, or we can spread it and make sure that when the next person steps in, it's never, you can't guarantee these things. But if everything is done properly, it should not be the sort of massive drop off that you sometimes see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We obviously
really like
spend sorry, Nejmi, go for it.
Well, I'm going to try and not take the Man United comment as a slight, being a Man United fan.
Well,
You can probably tell
you can take it however you like.
big, big Mancunian accent that's coming through that I'm a Man United fan. But I really like that because it faces the challenge. Effectively, what you're saying is, if I understand it correctly, is that if you consider yourself as a great leader or doing a great job in leadership, it's not just about the results that you're able to generate in the short term or even in the medium term, right? It's about creating the structures, the rhythms, the capabilities of those around you to be able to sustain that performance when you're moved on to the next opportunity or moved up or across in a complex organization. And so it puts the onus not just on what you do, but how you do it as a leader. That actually success is both of those factors. Often I think we can get distracted by just looking at like results as the easiest measure of success as a leader.
So I mean, listen, football, soccer, not my sport. It really isn't. I don't know that much about it, but I am old enough to remember watching the Dutch team of the 70s that played total football, whereby they just moved around the pitch, and if someone needed to cover, then it just seemed to happen.
Yeah.
Whereas you watch a lot of the modern stuff, you got one person standing on the side, like screaming orders at people who can't hear them anyway, and it's like, oh, they're down 3-0 after 20 minutes. Oh, this is going to be a testy halftime talk. I'm going, what? So you're telling me that the people actually out there on the field have got so little capability to manage the game themselves that they're going to continue doing what they're doing for another 25 minutes until the manager can sort them out? To me, I compare that to track and field, whereby an athlete goes into the core room probably in sprints, probably 45 minutes before their race. And that is the last time I will have the opportunity to talk to them. So they have to equip themselves not only to survive all the shenanigans that happen in the core room, but then go out onto the track. And if we're talking major championships, then perform in front of a few thousand people without any intervention.
Yeah.
So if I haven't helped them to be able to do without me, I have failed in my job. And that's the same approach that I bring to any work that I do. It's not about me sustaining the connect. No, I've got to work to make myself redundant. There's always things you can do and maybe go to the next level. Fine. But for the bit that we're working on, they need to be able to do that without me. And the amount of organizations I've been in where people, oh, no, well, I couldn't possibly take a holiday now, or I can't go, or I can't do it would all. I just go, well, I think that's telling you there's a bit of a problem.
Yeah, it's really cool. Let's move that on in the sense that we'll stick with a sort of broadly. Let's take your experience from the sporting world and translate it more into the organizational side of things, right? So if you think about your experiences of enabling, creating, facilitating high performing athletes, and you think about a performance review, because what we really want from you is twofold. One is to help organizations think about performance, the kind of performance, I really don't like the phrase at all, but like the kind of performance management-y bit or the performance review bit, in order to lead into the tactical part of having brilliant performance conversations. And I know you're awesome at that because I've been on the receiving end of it as well as understand the theoretical side. If you're thinking about what, the competitive advantage an organization might get from doing performance reviews well, where's the gold dust for organizations if they could get the process bit right, accepting that we do need to support the development of people to have those conversations, and that's the second bit we'll come on to.
Yeah. I guess this is where my take on this, my approach differs from a lot of what's out there, because what I see organizations doing is, we're talking about performance review, they'll look for a great performance review process. And that's fine. You got to have, in a big, especially in a large organization, you got to have some kind of a process. Otherwise, it's just chaos. So you need to have a process. So there's a huge amount of time and effort goes into how do we get a really, really good process, because we want to do this stuff right. Here's the challenge, though. To implement any process, at some point, it's going to come down to a conversation. Has to. You can't implement a process without that. So let's just, if I take the average of conversation skills that I come across, and yes, it's a broad average and across many sectors and everything else, but the starting average, I would say, even if I'm being generous, is maybe about 3 or 4 out of 10. So I'll just use those numbers. So let's say you find a performance review process which is 10 out of 10. There's nothing better. However, the skill level to actually hold a conversation of the people that will execute this process is 3 out of 10. Well, what do you think that's going to do to the quality of that performance review process? Because the skill level is always going to be the lowest common denominator. So for me, find a process, fine, absolutely brilliant, but upskill the people to be able to have really impactful conversations. And then you get the benefit of the process.
This reminds me of,
if you've got,
of an interview.
I was going to say, so if you look at that, 10 out of 10 process, 3 out of 10 skill, would you sooner take that? Or would you sooner take maybe a 6 out of 10 process with 6 out of 10 skills? Because I know which I'd go for. And not just because of the performance review, because if the conversation skill level is 6 out of 10, then if those people are doing leadership, succession planning, implementation of anything, it's 6 out of 10.
Yeah.
So the conversation skill level is the thing to really go for. But most organizations, because it's easier to put a tick on it and say we've done it, they'll go with, let's find a great process.
Yeah.
And that's not meaning to be critical. I'm just saying that, yeah, the process can be awesome, but it still needs implementing, and that's going to come down to the skill level of the person implementing it. Always will.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It reminds me of that interview I saw of you talking about the sort of technology of some of the Paralympic sprinters that you worked with versus the you working on the conditioning of the athlete, and that there's sort of like, well, you can have the smartest blades in the world for an amputee, but actually if they're out of condition, then that'll be the limiting factor, right? And I think
every time
the thing that you said, which really resonated with me, which I hadn't even crossed my mind, was the transferability of developing conversational skills. Means you can have those greater conversations anywhere in the organization, not just within the performance realm. So you've raised the tide on everything at that point, whereas the process is only good for the process, if that makes sense. I thought it was a great point.
Yeah. Well, the thing that really, and it's part of the reason why now some of the work that has kind of gone broader, is that what always fascinated me was I'd be running things like this inside an organization, and within every cohort, I'm hearing people come back and say, you know what, this has really helped me at work. However, it also means I'm having far better conversations with my kids or with my siblings it's because once you raise the skill level, it's raised. You're not going to go, well, actually, I'll have awesome conversations when I'm in the office, but I'll let them go down the toilet when I go home. I mean, it's just, yeah. So for me, that's it. In the same way as you say with athletes, it's, you get that base level high, then the ability to cope with things just goes way broader. And it's why so many people go, oh, challenging conversations. I go, well, it's actually just a conversation.
It's also
No, I
interesting.
know why people find them challenging, because either because they've done some coaching stuff which says, well, you ask them lots of questions to get them to where you want them to be. But that is part of the reason why so many people are, oh, they're really challenging, because they're desperately trying to lead someone to where they think they should be. I'm going, well, why would you do that? If it's a done deal, then just tell them. Why are you going to waste time asking them 101 questions, hoping beyond hope that they actually get the same idea that you've got? Well, if it's already decided, just tell them. But that does not get high level engagement, which does not then bring about the sort of level of performance that's needed, because without the individual taking ownership, performance is never really going to be there.
Nejmi, you were going to say something. Sorry, I was holding back because I didn't want to cut across you.
No, I just thought it's really interesting. Just the idea in itself, like when we think of it as being a challenging conversation, so that to me infers, oh, it's hard or it's negative. There's a negative association to being in a space that is challenging, whereas actually, leadership in and of itself, it should be like, that's a positive thing. You should be regularly challenged to, in your own performance, step up, in your own skill level, step up. It just occurred to me as you were describing the nature of these kind of challenging conversations, like that is, I think, by its nature, it should be considered a good thing that we lean into in order to have the maximum impact that we can have in our leadership.
Again, if the intention is to help people to perform and improve, then why is that ever a bad thing? Now, you may have to have some conversations which go into areas which people might prefer not to go into.
Yeah.
But if the ultimate aim is to get the development and the improvement, then there you go. I hear it all the time. Oh, we've got to give some negative feedback. I'm like, why are you doing that to yourself? It's because I will ask people and say, oh, so negative feedback's not great, is it? And they go, no, that's okay. So what actually starts happening in your head when you know you've got to get, even before the conversation happens? And they say, well, there's some of this and the stress, and how will they take? And I go, okay, so how does all of that help you to be at your best in the conversation? And when you flip it the other way and they go, oh, and give some positive feedback, then what you find is all the challenge and the stretch just disappears, because everyone's in party time, because it's, yay, positive feedback. It's just, no, it's feedback. Something happened. We're now going to talk about it. And the reason to talk about it is to learn, take what's relevant, move to the next level. It's, in a simplest way, it's just stuff. But once we go, it's positive, it's negative, it's a challenging conversation, that just kind of messes with the head, which means that we don't do stuff very well. So
I think in part, Keith, that's because often performance conversations are seen as an event rather than an ongoing dialogue with people. So, we'll save up a performance conversation to a quarterly, if we remember, half yearly, if we're really, diligent, and an end of year one, which we'll probably give somebody a form and say, write it and I'll sign it. I'm hamming it up, but if only that weren't, I hadn't seen that so many times. I'm sure you've seen it. But do you think in part that people frame it as challenging because they're just not, aside from whether they've actually got the skills, but they're just not having those conversations regularly? It's kind of built up to a big thing rather than a more regular, just BAU type activity.
Yeah, 100%. I would agree with that, Glenn. Again, it's not exactly the same, but if I transfer that notion of, I've now got to have a challenging conversation with this individual, if I transfer that kind of into sporting sense, that's a bit like an athlete saying, okay, the Olympics are next week, what do I have to do? Or as the coach, I'm going, yeah, they're in next week, they're in a fortnight, I've now got to go and talk to you. It's like, no, we've been doing this for either 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 4 years. So every conversation that we have is part of the process. So when people leave it, as you say, and build it into, now I've got to have a challenge, that just tells me that the conversations that should have been had previously have not been. So now you got this, oh, it's now here, it's in my face, and now I've got to deal with it. So yeah, and that goes for the leader as well. If they are continually honing their skills in this area, then any conversation that comes up is just a conversation. Don't get me wrong, some of them are testier than others. Some of them you have to work way harder than in others. But the core skills, if they're there, will carry you through. But if those core skills have not been honed daily, day after day, week after week, year after year, then when they're really needed, don't be surprised if it feels really, really challenging.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's almost like it's practice, right? Like it will feel less big and less scary, challenging, confronting, any of those things.
Yeah.
If it's a muscle that you are using regularly in the way in which you lead, if you're sharing back and helping everybody around you to level up on a regular basis, it's not just something that's deferred to once a year or twice a year. You'll feel more comfortable with it, and others will benefit too. And so how can leaders really then ensure that they are preparing and executing these conversations in a way that really enables the high performance as an output?
Okay, you see, therein Nejmi lies part of the problem, because I say pretty much everybody, a lot of people I come across, because it, in one level, like you said, you're just practicing, you got to practice. Most people feel that they're doing this already and that they're already good at this stuff. It's the same as, if I asked you, can you run? You go, yes, of course I can run. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be expecting to pull on the kids to go run in the Olympics in 28, because there's running and then there's running. So, yeah, we can all have conversations. At some point, people need to be prepared to say, I need to take my conversational skill to the next level. So I kind of look at it really, almost in a simple way. I can go and say to any organization, okay, well, what are you struggling with? Or what's your pain point right now? Or even what would you like to be, if you look at it positive, what would you like to be different? Where would you like to get it to at the next level? What's next for you? Any answer I hear is going to require a number of conversations to take place. It doesn't matter what it is. And if they're not there already, that sort of suggests, given that they know what it is they want to do, that the conversational skill level is not quite where it needs to be to achieve what they want to achieve. But what most will do is they'll chase another process, they'll look for another system, and look for another answer somewhere. And you can bring all of those stuff in, and they're all good things. But without that core skill level, it's going to struggle. And so that, in a way, is a challenge. It sounds blindingly obvious. It sounds like it's already, everyone goes, yeah, but we've done this. My experience would say that, yeah, in terms of not just having but really being impactful, having a high skill level to be able to generate thought, help people to work things out so that they can move forward. That's a skill that isn't naturally practiced, doesn't just drop into our lap, and therefore, without specific work for it, it's unlikely to be there.
And where would you, so let's assume that all of the Impactful Conversations listeners, the whole audience, are swayed by your very logical and eloquently put take on this, and let's say that they are open, they've got a growth mindset, couldn't help but drop that in, but genuinely, that they want to try to get better, and they're looking to you for some guidance. If you said, what are the key big rocks that they might want to think about in relation to preparing for those conversations, and then bearing in mind this isn't a training program, what would be the one or two key things that would make them better at having the conversations once they've done some prep? Can you give us some kind of tangibles to take away?
Yeah, well, let's kind of go almost. Let me answer that in reverse first of all,
sure.
And then I'll come back to that, because what I find is the biggest, or one of the biggest impediments to having a really impactful conversation is that people will do all of that prep. They'll think it all through beforehand. And I'm not saying that you just roll into an important conversation without giving any thought. That's not what I'm saying. But the more people kind of prep it in that sense, the more now they have an expectation for how that conversation, or how they would like that conversation to go. Therefore, as soon as it doesn't go that way, they're kind of now on the back foot. And being on the back foot stops them from doing the things that they need to do to have an impactful conversation.
Right.
So it's kind of, I like to say, I'm not saying just roll in, just, by the seat of your pants, but this notion of, I've got to prep for this, I've got to work it out. I'm thinking, no, because the key thing in any kind of conversation is being present. And if your head's full of, but I've got a bit of a plan, then you're not going to be present. So for me, a helpful kind of preppy type thing, I would say, and again, really simple, be clear about what's the reason for the conversation. Just at the headline, can you be really, what is the reason, the actual reason for the conversation? Can you bring that to a simple, short sentence? Why am I having this? Why do we need to have this conversation? If there's a reason, then something will have precipitated that.
Yeah.
So what's the thing that precipitated the reason? Can you just state that in a simple sentence? And if something precipitated it, then what's the impact of that? Because that's what normally doesn't turn up early enough in a conversation. Clarity about impact. So I would say to people that if I'm having it, that's my prep.
Can you give us an example of that last bit, Keith? Just jumping in a little bit. Sorry to interrupt. It's so good. I want to try and make that. Can you give us a sort of an example of that three levels? Because I've never heard you say. I've heard sort of versions of some of this, but never heard that. But I love the depth. It's both deep but loose in the sense that it gives people, it avoids that over prepping, and I get the sense that people become quite rigid then. This is really lovely. Give us a kind of that three layers, if you would. Can you just think up something vague?
As an example,
yeah.
Did you say?
Yeah.
Well, let's say that someone has delivered a piece of work and it hasn't gone down well. And as their line manager, their leader, you've got to have a conversation with them. So how might that sound? Reason, okay, you delivered this piece of work last week and we need to have a conversation about it. That's the reason for the conversation. Right. Okay. The action. What actually precipitating that? Okay. We've received some feedback that this did not meet the standard that was expected.
Yeah.
Impact.
Okay.
Like, given that it didn't meet the standard that was expected, things might get. Well, I'm going to say, I'll be serious. I'm going to say things are going to get shouty, but it wasn't good enough. Therefore, there's an element of rework, or there's an element of reputational damage, or whether it's for the individual or for the division, but it wasn't good enough. Now there's some fixing that needs to happen.
Got it.
So I'm not going to solution. I'm just going, just stating this is where we are.
Yeah.
The next bit, and this you might say out loud or you might keep it in your head, but if I'm talking to that individual, I want to be really clear about what is the thing I want them to think about.
Say a bit more.
And that could be numerous. In this example, it might be thinking about the work they did to go into it. It might be thinking about that impact. What does that actually mean that everyone's now looking at you or us and going, this wasn't good enough? But I'm going to be clear about what would I like to help this person to think through before we even get into how do we fix it? Because that's what tends to happen. This is what happened. How do we fix it? Well, if the other person's not really clear about the bits that join that up, any fix is going to be really surface level.
Yeah, I love that.
And then you start the conversation. So that's just setting it up. And that bit I will always prep.
Yeah.
The conversation then, once you get into it, is, well, then you've got to use the skills of, paying attention to the person, helping them to develop their thinking, locking things in, following where they're going, as well as the context, bringing all of that together. But without some clarity up front, just tends to meander all over the place.
Yeah.
I really like the simplicity of the structure. It's like a very logical way of approaching it, right? Like there are certain facts that need to be presented to help people ground the conversation in its focus. And that's the bit to prep. Don't over script the way in which you intend to have this impactful conversation or developmental conversation, performance related conversation. But it's after that information has been shared. That's where the conversation evolves from. And actually, there's a skill in that, but there's also a freedom in that, right? Like to relieve yourself of like pre-planning or expecting to be able to navigate the entire conversation ahead of that conversation actually happening. Just backing the skill level that you have to be able to navigate that person towards understanding and an agreement on what they can do differently in order to overcome the challenge that they've experienced.
And then that thing of it being, this is going to be really challenging. Well, as I say, some are testier than others, but now you can just go and have the conversation. Get that clarity up front, and now rely on the skills. And this is the point. If the skills are in place, you can trust yourself with the skills to then be able to have the conversation. If the skills are not in place, that's when people rely on the plan. That's when people rely on, I have my trusty list of questions which I will ask them, which I am sure will lead them to the point of agreeing with me, and then they can say yes and go off and do what I want them to do. Yeah, you can try that, but that's that's going to end in tears sooner or later.
You mentioned being present as maybe the overarching skill, and I agree with you absolutely in there. If we talk a bit more specifically about the skills, the other skills that would support having a good conversation, there's probably tens of those, but if you were going to say, look, for the audience, go and at least try and practice a few of these things, or get some feedback on 2 or 3 of these core skills. What would you identify, Keith, as the core skills to hold these conversations effectively?
For me, I think it starts with, and as obvious as it sounds, being able to pay attention. Yes, that sounds obvious. However, the ability to pay attention requires us to get out of our own heads and focus on whoever we're talking to. When people are having conversations, and partly because they've done all of that prep, they're busy in their own heads trying to work out how do I drive this conversation?
Yeah.
And what they're doing is they're missing all of the signals that are coming from the other person. Those signals might be visual, they might be verbal, they might be tonal, they might be facial, but the other person will give signals. So can we pay attention? If we can pay attention properly, can we spot the signals that the other person is giving off and use those signals to help guide the conversation as opposed to relying on all of our prep in our head? And the other key with that is if we can use the signals that they're giving us, can we then generate thought in the other person? And here's a really, really simple test. It's like, think about the last conversation you had with somebody. And I would always say, how many times did you really make them think? And people go, oh, yeah, I'm sure I did. Okay, well, let's make it a bit more objective. In the conversation, how many times did they stop? How many times was there a significant pause before they could respond? Because if the responses are coming quickly, they're just downloading out of their head. They're just reaching into the filing cabinet and just pulling stuff out. When you're having an impactful conversation, if the other person isn't pausing big time, at least on a few occasions, you're not making them do any work. And this is the problem. People talk about challenging conversations. It's challenging for the person leading because they're busy in their own head. The person on the receiving end is having a whale of a time. They're just rolling along with it going, okay, well, you're trying to tell me what to do, so I'll let you suffer for a little bit. And then I'll pick up the threads and then I'll say yes in the appropriate places. And then I'll just go off and carry on doing what I was doing because you haven't pushed me. You haven't challenged, you haven't done anything.
Yeah.
So if they're not really pausing and stopping, that is a significant marker. And I will do it. Listen to people's conversations. How many times do you hear the person, if you like, on the receiving end really stop because they cannot answer immediately because they're now really having to think and process? And that is the day job for any leader. Make your people work harder in their heads. When athletes came to me, I would always say, listen, I'm not that technical. I'll hurt your body because that just comes with the turf. I'm supposed to do that. But I will make you work in your head. You will have to process. If you want to work with me, I'm going to hurt your head as well as your body. And that, I don't see that in organizations anywhere near the level that it should be for people that are serious, saying they're serious about performance. The head work has to happen. And as a leader, if you can't make people's heads work, then I'm sorry, but that's not overly effective in my book.
I love that. And an unexpected metric, I think an unexpected metric for anyone to be, placing in their own development plan over the next year to come. How many pauses or showstoppers can you put into the conversations with those around you? I love that.
Brilliant. Well, look, we could go on because I know, having had the great pleasure of chatting with you on a number of occasions after running events and things, there's plenty in there, and maybe we could have you back another time to dig into some of the other areas of your expertise. But there's so many little gems in there, Keith, that I really hope that people that are listening to this episode, we would be when this goes out, we'll be in the middle of performance management season, which we've already debated is maybe not maybe an issue in itself. But what we were trying to time these episodes so that we can help people, where there are processes. And there's so much in here. It's fantastic. I've got lots of things in there myself that I've not heard you say, and lots of takeaways. I just want to repeat one, which was this idea of the preparation gives you the headspace if you can rely on the skills. When that preparation, don't overdo it because it can make you rigid and it makes you think the conversation is going to go one way and you can't respond and adapt if it's not. And that lovely 3-level, what's the reason for the conversation? What prompted the conversation to need to be had, and what are the impacts that we're now trying to deal with as a result of having the conversation. I think if you just did that, that's more than many give themselves the time and the headspace to do. That would be great. Nejmi, what one thing for you to take away before we thank Keith and let him get on with the rest of his life?
It's the new metric for whether you're an effective like people developer or helping people to perform beyond when you're there. Sustainable performance, which is how many times have you made the recipient pause for thought in your conversation? And Keith, you've made me pause to think a few times, so you can tick that on your metric on that front. So thank you so much, Keith.
That's my job. That's what I do. I think just as a kind of summary piece, that what really made the light bulb go on for me was the thing of when I switched from, because I spent a lot of time sort of doing that in that sort of space of coaching stuff and helping people do that, but it was when I realized this isn't intellectual or the approach that really makes a difference. This isn't something to understand. It's a skill to be developed. And once you appreciate it as a skill to be developed, you can break it down, you can measure it, you can practice it, you can repeat it, you can learn, and you can make it better. And you can see it getting better. But you have to see it as a skill set as opposed to a series of models or theories or intellectual constructs to follow. Because that's, you can understand it. Doesn't mean you can do it. Lots of people understand how to run. Doesn't mean they can run very fast. But it's a skill.
And by positioning it that way, it makes it more accessible. It's not like some magic that are only available to a few. If it's a skill, everyone, you're not going to say everyone's going to be awesome at it, but everyone can improve. That's your point, right?
Everyone can improve. 100%.
Brilliant. Where could people find you, Keith, if they wanted to know a little bit more about the work or contact you for some further conversations and things? Where's the best place?
I'm on LinkedIn. They can find me there. They can find me through my site at Real Thought. That's one word, Real Thought. I should do more on socials that I don't. LinkedIn is probably the best, or as I say, through Real Thought. That will do. Right. Well, they know where to find you, and so if they find you, they can find me there.
We will definitely put those contact details into the show notes so that people can find you on LinkedIn and make that connection, which I'm sure many might well do, because this has been absolutely fantastic. It's been lovely to see you again in this context, and thank you from both of us for your time. And
thanks for the invitation. It's been a pleasure to speak with you both.
Fantastic.
Really,
and to everyone else out there watching.
Awesome. Thanks very much. Cheers, everyone.